Hey there, it's Steven from Attenuation. Thank you for being a listener to the podcast. Due to some holiday conflicts, we did not record a new episode this week. Instead, we are rebroadcasting one of our early episodes where we talked about white whale beers. But this time, good news, it's edited and remastered, which hopefully makes it a little easier to listen to. It's really fun to see how much progress we've already made with the podcast, and we thank you again for being a listener. Please enjoy this rebroadcast, and then be sure to join us next week for a brand new episode. Cheers. Welcome to Attenuation, a weekly podcast where two friends come together to drink beer, discuss beer styles and trends, and just generally ruminate on the meaning of life, aka beer. If you enjoy your time with us, we invite you to become a weekly listener and subscribe to the podcast. Without further ado, here is this week's episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason and I'm here with my best friend since 8th grade, Steven.
Hello.
Steven.
It's going wonderful.
That's great. And we're continuously upgrading our technological situation. So
Yes.
We can see each other now. So.
I know. I love this. I can see your beautiful face.
It's getting better and better. So what is our topic for today, Steven?
All right. Well, we are doing an episode about white whales. And for those of you who don't know what a white whale is in the craft beer community, it's those beers that, I guess another word would be like bucket list beers or beers that you want to try. And they tend to be more famous beers, more harder to get. Sometimes it's not always harder to get for everyone. Lots of times these are geographical. So a lot of beers up in in New England or like on the California coast, if they don't distribute nationwide, then those beers are very, very hard to get. And then a lot of times they're just one-off, so they're only available for maybe a day or a couple weeks or something a year. So anyway, these are just beers that tend to be rated very high. I mean, these could just be personal white whales. We will get to one on my list that is just something that I want to try. I don't think it would be on a lot of people's white whale list. But yeah, so they tend to be beers that just are highly rated and highly sought after. And we're going to talk about some of the ones that we have caught and what we thought about them when we caught them, and then a few that are still at large.
All right, I like it. So yes, whales we have caught and the flavor of their flesh, and whales we are still hunting. So before we get to the main topic, we got to do, of course, what we're drinking.
Yes.
So should I go first here?
Go first.
All right, so I have another stout. I'm very excited. This is Cafe Rado from White Elm Brewing Company. That's in Lincoln, Nebraska. So this is an American Imperial Stout. The ABV here is 13%, so I probably shouldn't be drinking this by myself on a weekday, but that's okay. So this
you work from home. So
yeah. So this is an Imperial Stout aged in rye barrels with Mexican and Madagascar vanilla, cacao, cinnamon, chilies, and whole coffee beans. So I'm pretty excited about this. I've realized I really like cinnamon in stouts. I'm not too excited about the whole coffee beans, so we'll just have to see how this works out.
You like the long list of flavor profiles.
I guess I do. That's kind of in the theme. And this, I'm pouring this, and it's as black as night. So that's always a good sign.
I can see it this time, which is cool.
So yeah, this is going to be quite a challenge. I'm going to try to identify some of these flavors. So on the nose right away, I'm definitely getting like dark chocolate, cinnamon, coffee, vanilla, maybe like cigar smoke, maybe. I don't know if that's some of the barrel aging aspect, but in the interest of me not just sitting here and having dead air, I'm going to give this some tastes and see, give my overall impressions of it. But why don't you introduce what beer you're drinking today while I enjoy this one?
Okay, cool. So in the spirit of today's episode, white whales, I decided to drink one of my original white whales. And this is actually a different version of one of my original white whales. So the beer is called Pseudo Sue. It's American Pale Ale from Toppling Goliath Brewery in Decorah, Iowa. This always makes the top 3 American Pale Ale lists. This beer that I'm drinking today is actually a double dry hopped version. For those who don't know, dry hopping is just a process during it's used during the brew process, where after you've boiled your beer and you've cooled it and pitched yeast into it, so now the yeast are fermenting the beer. During the couple weeks of fermentation, you can do a thing called dry hopping, which is just adding hops to the beer as it ferments. So this is there's a lot of like questions about what it even means to say your beer is double dry hopped. Is it hopped with twice the amount of hops? Is it dry hopped twice during fermentation? It's not a real specific definition of what it means to double dry hop, but in general it just means that you've had additional additions of hops during fermentation beyond what the basic recipe. So
Gotcha.
this is Pseudo Sue Pale Ale with a couple additional dry hoppings. And Pseudo Sue, the original recipe, is 100% Citra hopped. So it's just one kind of hop used. So one of the popular iterations of Pseudo Sue is the Mosaic double dry hopped. So that's where they dry hop in fermentation with a Mosaic hop. This one is just the straight double dry hop. So they just kept going with the Citra hop.
Okay, so it's Citra to begin and Citra for those. So it's Citra all the way through.
All the way through, yep.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, so this should be a really amped up version of one of my all-time favorite beers.
And I will also report that I love Pseudo Sue. We got it very briefly in one of the grocery stores, the fancier grocery stores around here, and I was delighted to buy some, but then it quickly evaporated into thin air.
So one of my favorite aspects of Pseudo Sue is, and this is a flavor profile from Citra is mango. And this is even crazier. Like as soon as I opened the can, start pouring it, it was like mango all the way.
That's awesome.
It's 100% mango.
And I can see it looks very good.
Wow, that's really good. I would like to do a side-by-side tasting the original.
That would be an excellent comparison. Yeah.
I expect it to be less bitter because dry hopping usually tends to impart more fruit flavors and fewer less bitterness, but it's pretty bitter, surprisingly. It's just a lot of pine coming through, which is another Citra hop flavor. Bright citrus, bright pine, and mango. And this is, it's certainly amped up with all Citra.
Nice. Sounds like a good one. And I like your idea of comparing it to if you could get them side by side.
Yeah.
That would be especially interesting. All right, so I'll give you my tasting notes on Cafferado, and also I'm going to give you a thumbs up, thumbs down going forward. So, when I first started tasting craft beers, I had this notebook, like one of those fancy moleskin notebooks someone got me for my birthday or something. And I was like, oh, I'm never going to use this. Like, what am I ever going to use this for? But then I got this idea. I was like, oh, I'll write tasting notes in it. So I have really stupid tasting notes, this stupid notebook. But what I eventually realized is rather than score things, because it's so subjective, all I ever really want to keep track of is would I like to drink it again or would I not like to drink it again? So eventually what my notebook just became was a list of beers I had tried, and if I thought it was worthy of buying again, I put a star next to it, and if I thought it wasn't, no star. And that's basically kind of been my metric going forward. So I really like this one. You just get sweet chocolate in the entrance, and then it kind of settles into the vanilla and the cinnamon, and then there's a little bit of coffee at the end, and I do think I'm detecting a little bit of rye on the finish because this is aged in rye barrels. And overall, the coffee's not overpowering. All the flavors are present, and they're kind of balanced in a really nice way. And at 13%, I'm not getting a lot of the boozy alcohol. It's going down quite smoothly. So I'm going to give this my seal of approval and say I would definitely drink this one again. So
nice.
Yeah, I'm excited. I like this one. It's going to get a star in the little notebook.
I'm surprised it didn't have more coffee.
Yeah, I am actually shocked. So the one thing I do think is missing is I'm not really getting the chilies. I thought maybe it would have a little bit more spice in the finish. And when they said whole coffee beans, I was a little bit worried. But the coffee's there, but it's not overpowering. All the flavors are really well balanced. Albeit I do feel like the chilies are maybe absent. Maybe my palate is not sophisticated enough to detect them.
Yeah, you gotta drink more chili beers, man.
I guess so, yeah. What's your verdict on that double dry hopped?
Yeah, I never turned down Pseudo Sue any kind or any way, but it's not my favorite. I will say I have had the Mosaic double dry hop version, and I think that may be my favorite, just because I think sometimes do need like multiple hops. They just balance each other out. I think this is like, I mean, if you want Citra in your face all day, this is it. I mean, there's just no hiding it. It's a lot of pine. It's a lot of, it's like I said, it's more bitter than I thought, but I know it's pseudo Sue. I'll drink it.
You won't say
this is I'll drink it every time. You put this in front of me every time.
So it gets a star in your notebook as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, so that is what we are drinking today. I think we were going to cover, did you want to cover this top 50 list?
Yeah, so breaking news. Well, actually, by the time this episode is available, it'll be a little bit late. But yeah, breaking news today. The Brewers Association released the top 50 brewing companies by sales volume. And no real surprises, actually. There was no changes really to within the top 10. There weren't really significant changes. Youngling and Son, Boston Beer Company, and Sierra Nevada are the top 3. And they have been for a while. Boston Beer Company is Sam Adams and Dogfish Head are their 2 main beer brewers that they own. So obviously, I mean, Sam Adams is in every single grocery store.
Yes.
That's really not surprising. It's really cool that Sierra Nevada is in the top 3. It just makes me
now,
happy.
and because they do have production facility on the East Coast now as well, and
North
Carolina. It's been a while now. I feel like it just happened, but I don't. I think it was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, time flies. Yeah, it has been a while. But yeah, they're in North Carolina as well, I think. But I think even before then, they were distributing pretty widely.
Okay.
And then that just made it easier.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Other than that, Bell's Brewery is in the top 10, which is a hometown brewer for Jason.
That's right. So I didn't know this. I actually like Bell's Brewery. We're actually going to talk about it in the White Whale list. But I didn't know they were located... Well, it says Comstock on this list, but I believe they have facilities in Comstock and Kalamazoo. And I'm actually not born in Kalamazoo, but I was raised half my childhood till 8th grade in Kalamazoo until I moved to California and met Steven, immediately upon moving to California. So, but yeah, I didn't know. That's pretty cool that Bell's has a brewery there in Kalamazoo where I grew up. Before my beer drinking days, to be honest.
Now where's Comstock?
Comstock is basically adjacent to Kalamazoo.
Okay.
So actually, it might even be Comstock County or something like that. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah.
I failed my geography class for Michigan.
But yeah, some of the other top 10 Deschutes in Bend, Oregon. It's a favorite of mine. Mirror Pond Ale. Talked about Black Butte Porter last week. Just some good beers coming out of Bend, Oregon. Stone Brewing in San Diego, one of my all-time faves. That's a great tap room if you're ever in San Diego, by the way. Great food. So, some really cool breweries.
It's a cool list. It actually surprised me that Stone is number 9. I guess I had no reference point to how big they were.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, and even the fact that 21st Amendment is on, they're in the top 50, they're in 34.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
In fact, I just saw they had Hell or High Watermelon in a grocery store here in Texas, so they're pretty much everywhere. So it makes sense, but it's really cool to see what I think of as smaller independent craft brewers getting nationally distributed and brewing at high volumes,
Yeah, 21st Amendment is very cool. So one of their locations is kitty corner to Drake's. So we did do a trip. I did a brewery trip where we just knocked out Drake's and 21st Amendment in one trip. And 21st Amendment probably has to be hands down the coolest name for a brewery in existence. So props to them. You just can't beat 21st Amendment.
Hey, another good one, which is on the list at 42, is St. Arnold Brewing in Houston.
Nice.
As far as names for a brewery, being named after the patron saint of beer.
Man, maybe that is the best name. I immediately have to eat my words, because look it up on Wikipedia. There is indeed a patron saint of beer brewing, which is it's pretty dope.
A hero to all, St. Arnold.
All right, cool. So let's get into the main topic. So I think first let's cover whales we have caught and then kind of our reactions to them.
Okay.
So do you want to take the first one and then we can just pass it back and forth?
Yeah, I'll take the first one. This is a beer I've mentioned a few times on the podcast already. It's very famous, and it's called Pliny the Younger from Russian River Brewing in Santa Rosa, California. It is a triple IPA. It is brewed once a year. This is kind of just sort of a fun history. Just because I know so much about this beer, it's easy for me to talk about. They brew this once a year. It's always in February, so they're kind of brewing it throughout January, fermenting it. And so usually it's the first weekend in February, kicks off a 2-week Pliny the Younger event where it is available. Russian River, a few years back, opened up an amazing facility in Windsor, California, which is a few miles from Santa Rosa. It is one of the coolest facilities ever. If you ever get there and tour that, it's fantastic. I think Jason would agree.
It's one of the coolest places on the planet.
Yeah, it's like they basically had made so much money off Pliny the Elder, which is their flagship IPA or double IPA, like that they had all this money to spend on basically the best beer brewing facility, and it's awesome. So anyway, they brew this beer, and for 2 weeks it's available at their tap rooms, both the one in Santa Rosa and the one in Windsor. I mean, we had 2 different experiences. The first year we went to the release, I think it was Super Bowl Sunday, and it was the first year they had it available at the Windsor facility. And so anyway, we got really lucky. We got right in. And we took a tour that time, and we were able to drink Pliny the Younger on the tour. And then we had like really easy access into the tap room where we continue to enjoy. But it's heavily regulated. Like you get, I think you can have 3 pints of it while you're in. You can only be in the restaurant for 2 hours.
That visit gave us a false sense of security.
Yeah, because follow up, the next year we went and the line was very, very long. And also the big change of the second year was that they decided to bottle it, which they had never done before. So not only were you going to be able to get in and drink it, you were also going to be able to take it home, which was just something they'd never done. No one had been able to leave the facility with a bottle of Pliny the Younger, which is crazy. So that was a big change that I guess we should have seen coming, but the line was much longer. We waited in line, I think, for...
How many hours? It was a lot.
It was about... Well, okay, so I said 2 hours in the thing. I think you can stay in... Wow, was it 4 hours? Yeah, you can stay in there for 4 hours. So what ends up happening is that they let the first group in, and if you're not in the first group, like, you know you're probably going to be in the line for another... Yeah. And maybe it was 3 hours. I'm butchering it, but whatever the length of time, you know you're going to be sitting there for that length of time before really anybody starts to leave. I mean, maybe a few trickle out, but so... And it was a very, very long line. And this is actually a perfect story for this podcast, because this is why this is a white whale. It is so hard to get. And people, I mean, I had very close friends of mine calling me a crazy person for standing in line for 4 or 5 hours just to get a beer, you know?
Who was standing in that line with you, buddy?
My bestie.
Because I'm also that crazy. And you know what? It was worth it.
I mean, did it even really feel like that long of a wait?
No, and the line was so fun because everyone in that line is like just as crazy about craft beer as you are. So we were just striking up conversations left and right about, you know, what's good, where are you from? And people are coming from all over to go to this release. So the energy is there. It's kind of like going to, you know, like opening night at the movie theater for the new Star Wars movie or something. There's just this like sense of excitement in the line, and everyone's in a great mood there. So the whole experience is worth it, I think. But we were in line for many hours.
Well, and it's actually a great analogy because, like, look, if you go 2 weeks after the Star Wars movie comes out, you're not waiting in a long line. It's you know, like, there's no big deal. It's easy to go see the movie. And so from an outsider's perspective, it's like, dude, go drink some other beer at another place. Or, you know, like, you can get a triple IPA somewhere else, but it's Pliny the Younger. I mean, this is like one of the most, if not the most famous craft beer, at least these days. And it's just cool to be there. It's just, you're with other people who love craft beer. I remember seeing an article in the paper about this lady. She had never had craft beer before, and that was her first craft beer with Pliny the Younger. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, right. Like, that's where you're starting.
That's insane, by the way. And if she enjoyed it, that's even more insane. But anyway, such a cool experience. And I have a picture memorializing the moment when I first drank Pliny the Younger on the tour. It's hands down my favorite picture of me. It looks like I'm ascending into heaven as I drink it. There's like this glow around my bald head. It just...
That's amazing.
It might be the sunlight, but it might be the beer gods shining down on me. I don't know.
I think it was the latter. Well, I remember because the second time we went, we were kind of in that side room. And I remember, so you're allowed to get 2 pours of it, I think, and it's on they give you a wristband, and then when they give you your pour, they tear off, the little ticket, so you can only get 2 pours. And I remember just looking down, we were actually at the bar, and I was just looking down the whole bar, people getting their first pours, and just like watching them have the experience. And it was so cool to people just to watch huge beer nerds get their nose down in that beer and then take a sip and then just see, all the calculations that are occurring inside their mind as they try to parse this insanely complex beer. So you would say that was a whale that you caught that was worth it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wish I probably can't describe the beer that well, like without it in front of me.
Sure.
It's always hard, but
well,
yeah, it's just
another tidbit about So sorry to cut you off, but
no,
you taught me this. Don't they actually change the recipe every year?
They do, yeah. And I mean, I think like the problem is every hop harvest is different, right? Mm-hmm. And this is we're gonna go off a tangent here a little bit, but I remember when I first got into like alcohol in general, and I was drinking a lot of wine with my wife, and for her birthday, she wanted to go to Napa and do a little winery tour. So we hired this tour guide to take us to a couple different wineries. Really cool experience. But I was asking him, because I had such little knowledge at this time, and I was asking him, like, when they make wine, do they add things to it, right? Do they add fruit? Because you'll read different wine tasting profiles, like, hints of raspberry and da-da-da. And I was like, do they ever add stuff? And he was like, no, it's just from the grapes. Like, this is just grapes. So that's, the equivalent of that in beer is where you have these hops, and you have hop profiles that give off melon and blueberry and pine, and it's all these flavor profiles that we list off when we're tasting. And a lot of that just comes from the hops. Mm. Now, lots of different beers tend to, they will fruit the beers. They'll add other stuff, which is a little different than wine. So anyway, so you have this hop harvest. And so the brewers, Vinny and I think his wife is Natalie at Russian River, they go, and of course, like, they're so well known, they get like the first pick of hops and stuff. And so they go up there, and they're basically tasting hops. They're smelling them. And their abilities are so fine-tuned that they're able to like figure out a combination of different hops that are going to get them to the point where they want to get, and so maybe that means changing one hop, but like they have a flavor profile in mind, like this is Pliny the Younger, and then it's just how you get there might change.
That's really cool. So yeah, they know the end product, and their expertise is parsing through the variation in the hop, yield year to year. It actually reminds me of, if you ever saw the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi, he sends his buyer to the fish market. He basically turns to the camera and he says, basically, for each fish I'm looking for in the market, there is one fish of that type that is the best fish at the whole fish market. That's the fish I'm buying. Like, I'm hunting down and buying the absolute best fish every day at the fish market to serve in the restaurant. So yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of that. So that is cool. So, okay, we're marking up Pliny the Younger as a whale that was satisfactory.
Absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to share my first whale, and it's, spoiler alert, dissatisfactory.
Oh, no.
So my first white whale is Jai from Cigar City Brewing. They're based out of Tampa, Florida. So this is an American IPA, 7.5% ABV. And so this is kind of brings me to a topic I wanted to cover in this episode, and that's hype. So every hobby has hype, and you just never know if things are hyped because they deserve it, or if they're just hyped because whatever, it's the flavor of the week. So I was really excited to try this beer, and the first time I tried it, I think, now it's highly regarded, it's highly rated, so it could be just my my own personal preference. I could be totally off base. Send us your hate mail. But I did not like this beer. And that was actually my first experience of like trying a beer, because I would swear like I would look at things I'd look at ratings, I'd look at the top 250 beers rated on Beer Advocate, and just, look at these high scores. So I was convinced I was going to love it, but we got the opportunity to drink it. So I've had it multiple times. I actually had it at the Great American Beer Festival. I didn't like it. And then I had it again. We got it, for whatever reason, we got it in our local grocery store. And I thought, it's been a couple years. Maybe I misjudged that beer. Maybe I didn't give it a fair shake. I bought a 6-pack of it. Didn't like it. So yeah, it's just kind of a beer that, on its face, it's extremely highly rated and just didn't resonate with me for whatever reason. So yeah, that was a white whale of mine, a personal white whale that I really wanted to try, that, when I finally caught up to it, it wasn't worth the hunt, Stephen, as to continue with our whale hunting analogy.
Hey, a great memory related to that is that I remember our first trip to the Great American Beer Festival. I knew very little. All I knew going into that festival was I like gozas.
That's right.
So I had I was like, but I knew there were going to be tons of sours there, so I was super excited. I knew nothing about like different breweries or what breweries to go to and stuff, but you knew we need to go to Cigar City.
Yes.
So that was our first stop. We ran there, and we got beanies. Do you still have your Cigar City beanie?
I do.
Yeah, me too. They gave away free beanies. Still have that beanie. And yeah, that was I assume that's when we got Jai Alai.
Yep, I wanted to try Chew. And actually, I didn't write this down on the list, but now that you're reminding me of this, Hunapa, I think that's the original reason I wanted to go there. I wanted to try their stout, and I wanted to try Jai Alai. So I remember I made this list. It was like written on a piece of paper. And I told Steven, like, I've strategically planned. I want to try these 10 beers, and 2 of them are at Cigar City. So we're going to like get in, we're going to run to Cigar City, and we're going to knock these 2 out. And in fact, we're going to continue with this white whale. And I don't want to get off to a sidetrack, but let's make a note here for an episode in the future. We should make a attending Great American Beer Festival strategy guide. I think that would that'd be a great episode, because we've been a few times and we've definitely learned a thing or two about attending.
Yeah, we got lots of helpful tips.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great episode. So what is your number 2 whale?
Okay, so I'm going to, this I think is an overlap for us, but I think it might be a difference in opinion, because one of my whales was Bell's Two-Hearted. And I was disappointed.
So I wrote it down on my list too, and I wrote it down as one I really liked. But please share your impressions first.
Well, I remember one thing I didn't really like. I really liked, like I said, I liked gozas at the time, but just paler beers, lighter beers. I didn't really like malty styles, and I think it just surprised me how malty it was. Because I had heard it compared to Pseudo Sue. In fact, I think I don't know if it's up on the list with Pseudo Sue, but it's an American Pale Ale, which, come to find out, I've learned later, is actually a maltier style. But anyway, I think Bell's Two-Hearted is 100% Centennial hops, if I remember right. But anyway, I didn't love it, and that may have been like partially what my tastes were at the time. I have had Bell's Two-Hearted since. It's really easy to get where I am in Texas, but yeah, it's still not it's not a favorite of mine.
Gotcha. So yeah, I had the opposite experience. I actually have had it a few times. So when I've been into craft beer for a while, and I had a coworker. I've actually had a couple coworkers bring me beers, which has been really nice. So I guess I had the reputation at work of being the beer snob. So
yeah, me too.
So a couple of my coworkers were like, I've had 2 people bring me things. One was Zombie Dust from Chicago. Someone brought me a 6-pack of that. And actually,
nice.
we drank that one together from Chicago. And then, I don't know if you remember, it was in your backyard. And then someone brought me, same deal. They were going to somewhere on the East Coast, or maybe they were going to Michigan, and they brought me a Two-Hearted Ale. So that was the first time I tried it. Loved it. Lived up to the hype for me. And then we tried it again at the Great American Beer Festival. Loved it the second time. And I'm pretty jealous that you have ready access to it. So
yeah. And that's a good example of the geographical differences. Sometimes a beer that's like super easy to get for some people is just impossible to get across the country.
I can get Pliny the Elder all day long. So
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what's your third white whale?
Okay, so my third. Well, I talked about Pseudo Sue because I'm drinking it, so I won't really talk about that one. Although, and that's obviously a thumbs up for me. But I will say the very first time. So Toppling Goliath actually was at the beer festival our first year. They have not been there since, which has been very disappointing. But they have Pseudo Sue. They also have a double IPA called King Sue. That's one that first year where I think it was probably on your list of like, we have to go try this. And so we did, but I think at that time I didn't really understand like a double IPA. There's no way I was liking that, but I do now. I've had King Sue a few times. That's an amazing beer if you ever get to try King Sue from Toppling Goliath. So anyway, that's brief. I'll move on to my third major one, which is Goza. It's Reuben's Goza. Now they had won. They're from Seattle, I think. They had won the gold at the beer festival 2 years in a row for that Goza. So it was sort of like, I have to get that. If it's won gold twice in a row, like that's it, you know. So I don't know if it was a white whale for very many people, but it certainly was for me because that was my favorite style of beer, and it's amazing. There are so many iterations of Goza now. Most of the time, breweries add fruit to it. And it's a perfect beer to add fruit to, especially like melons or passion fruit and guava works really well because it's a salty beer. I've had some really good grapefruit Gozas. That works really well. So anyway, it's a beer that lends itself to being fruited, but the original style is really just wheat, coriander, and salt, and those are the ingredients for a Goza.
Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. I've had a few basic Gozas, but they used only those ingredients. Reuben's is by far just incredible. It's like lemony and tart, and just like this crisp. I mean, they call it a sour beer, but it's really just tart. It's kind of tart, crisp, lemony. Got that like cracked wheat bread, like just undertones. Man, it's just so good, and they're usually like 4 or 5%. We've talked about bitterness units, IBUs. It's usually like a 7 IBUs. There's no bitterness. It is just kind of sweet, kind of tart, and just kind of a bright, ease of drinking and refreshment.
You're making me crave one right now.
Tell me, I crave it every day, but it's very hard to find.
That's
for me.
Awesome.
So that's it. Reuben's Goza, man. That's my number one white whale that I caught and I loved.
That's on our short list for brewery visits too. So
yeah,
we'll see how that plays out. Well, we might do a podcast in the field report. So my third one is Illusion of Safety. Now, there's been a couple different variants of this, but I remember you got this beer. So this is from Adroit Theory Brewing Company, and they're based in Virginia. And this is a sour, and I remember you got this bottle from Tavor, and it looked so cool. Like the art that Adroit Theory does should be on posters or T-shirts. Like
their can art is so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you got this beer, and I was so excited to try it. And we opened it, and it just like exploded. So something had happened in the shipping or the canning where it just wasn't good. So we weren't able to drink it at that time. So, being denied it only made me want it more. One of the years we were at Great American Brew Festival, they had the mango version of Illusion of Safety, and this is a whale worth catching. I just remember it was one of the most sour beers I've ever tasted in my entire life. It was so sour. And I remember they were telling us, because they were pouring it into our taster, and it was so thick too. And they were warning us like, hey, you need to really rinse your glass out after you drink this, because if you don't rinse it out very carefully, it's going to taint whatever you pour in there next.
It was like a mango smoothie.
Yeah, it was.
It was so thick.
It was viscous. They were pouring it as like motor oil. And so it was amazing. So being denied it the first time, I was so happy to get to taste it the second time. And everything I've actually had from Adroit Theory, I've been really impressed with. Not only, obviously the tasting and the beer experience, but just kind of the names, what they name their beers, and then the can styles. I'm very tempted to keep their cans when I do receive them, because the art is so cool.
I guess they're huge, like metalheads there. So I think a lot of their beer names are from like metal albums and stuff, and they just like always have like super loud metal music playing in their tap room. So it's just their thing.
That's awesome. That would explain a lot. I'm not into metal, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great one, man. I remember I just kept going back to that.
Yes.
Booth. Like, can I have more of that? Like, is there a limit?
There is no limit.
No limit.
Okay, so what is your next white whale?
So that covers all the ones I've caught.
Okay.
Do you have any more that you've caught?
So let me do my last caught, and then I'll tell you some of the ones that are still at large. So
Okay.
my last caught is Fundamental Observation from Bottle Logic Brewing. They're based in Anaheim, California. This is probably hands down my favorite beer in the world. It's really highly rated. So part of the way I found some of these was I knew the first time we were going to Great American Beer Festival, there's going to be a lot of beers that are rated in the top 250 beer list on Beer Advocate, and I really wanted to try them. So, like, for example, Pliny the Younger is number 6. So pretty highly rated. Fundamental Observation is number 13. And loving stouts and knowing they were going to be there, I really wanted to try it. It was definitely worth it. I can't even begin to describe how good this beer is. And, obviously it's really hard to recall, like, tasting notes on the fly, but it's an experience, to be sure. And the funny part of the story, too, is, like, I remember tasting that beer, and it was so amazing. And then I remember going, so my wife is a huge Disney nut, so she's always dragging me to Disneyland. So she'll always get the season pass, and then she'll go with some of her friends, but every couple of trips she's going to drag me along. So I always try to figure out something. I do like Disney, but I was
going to say, you love it.
Yeah, I kind of do love it. I just don't like to admit it. So one of the times I'm like, okay, we're going to be in Anaheim. We're going to go to Bottle Logic. They make Fundamental Observation. They ought to be amazing. So kind of a split score here. Definitely worth getting Fundamental Observation. Although when I went to the brewery, I was not impressed. I got like the whole flight of everything they had on tap. Obviously, they didn't have Fundamental Observation. That's like one of those, once a year kind of things they make. But yeah. I just wasn't super impressed with their lineup. Not to say it was bad, but the problem is this is kind of feeding back into the hype conversation. I was so blown away by Fundamental Observation that I had built up the expectation for the rest of their lineup to be amazing. And then when it was just solid, I was not impressed. So, although the other thing that I do like to do, I have a lot of weird, like, neurotic hobbies around beer. So one is every brewery I go to, I will buy a glass with the name of the brewery, and they had the coolest glasses ever. So Bottle Logic had these little like tulip glasses. They're like tasting glass size, but they're tulip glasses, and they're like the crown jewel of my glass collection. I always bust them out when I'm sharing a beer with people. So overall, Fundamental Observation, amazing. I wasn't blown away by their lineup, but send us your hate mail if I'm off base. I think it was solid. I just wasn't blown away. So
yeah, you're comparing a beer that they brew once a year.
Yes.
Very limited release to stuff they brew all the time, or they're just
right. All right. So I think that catches us up with caught whales. Let's turn it back over to Stephen for the first whale that remains at large.
All right. Well, going back to the sort of geographical difficulties, really, being a sort of hophead and an IPA lover, the New England IPAs, sort of the OG New England IPAs that actually come from New England, are some of my big whales. One of which is Heady Topper from the Alchemist Brewing.
That's on my list too.
Yeah. So it's in Vermont, and it just... I've heard of it getting out and people finding it other places, but I'm sure it's such a rarity. And I think it's fairly easy to get if you're in that area, but just one of those I'm going to have to travel up there to get.
Yes. Heady Topper is also on my Whales at Large list, sitting at number 5 on the top 250.
Yep, I just think if you're a fan of New England IPAs, that's the one. The other one would be King Julius from Treehouse. Is that on your list too?
Yes. So basically, I know. My list just says like Treehouse, period.
Yeah, something from Treehouse, please.
Because all I hear is Treehouse this, Treehouse that.
Yeah.
But they weren't at Great American Beer Festival. Ironically, like another brewery that I'd really like to learn more about is New Glarus. For whatever reason, we get New Glarus beers at our local, so Northern California, Sacramento area. At the local beer festivals, New Glarus shows up with a bunch of stuff. So I don't know why they're coming out to Sacramento, but that's another one on my list. Like I've just been really impressed with everything they've distributed out here for those beer festivals. But yeah, it does not seem like Treehouse makes it out to the West Coast, and it doesn't sound like Texas either. So
no, I mean I think Russian River's the same way about their IPAs. They want you to drink them fresh, and they want total control over their beer quality. And as soon as you send it out, Russian River will send kegs. I don't know how many kegs they send of their regular stuff, but they do send kegs at Pliny the Younger, like to some tap rooms in Denver, and there's big events in other parts of the country where they tap their Pliny the Younger kegs. So it does get out, but again, they're still having control because those kegs are going to get tapped and drank within a couple weeks.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think Treehouse is just the same way. They want total control over how fresh their beer is being consumed. And so once you start distributing nationwide, you lose a lot of that control. So it's good. It's understandable.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah, you want to control that because IPAs are one of the rare styles and part of the reason I like stout so much is that I can get them, put them in my fridge and forget about them, and they might actually be getting better.
Yeah.
Now, I think there is actually a cutoff. So I have tried this with Firestone. They have a lot of bottled beers, and I have, like, Eldorado is one of their beers that they bottle, and that's a barley wine, I believe. I could be mixing it up. It might be the oatmeal. But I have actually bought, like, multiple years of that and then let them age I'll actually let one go for 3 years. So I opened one at 1 year, one at 2 years, and one at 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I do think 3 years was maybe a little too far, but it did seem to improve with time. So I do like stouts because you can kind of put them in the beer fridge, forget about them. IPAs, on the other hand, you want to drink as fresh as possible. So that is, that's one unique thing about that style of beer, and it makes sense that they'd want to control it because if you do get one that's old, it's not necessarily going to be bad, but it's not going to be the full presentation of the style.
Yeah, those hop flavors are just going to start to erode. So.
Yeah, so you might be less impressed, and they want to protect that hype and that image they have that they're an amazing brewery. So another one, I don't know if this is on your list as well, is I want to try something from Funky Buddha Brewery. Okay. Because they also have quite a number of beers. They actually have one called, this is Morningwood. So that's an Imperial Porter, 12%. That's another one that's kind of out there. I really want to try it. It's all the way out in Florida. So I've never seen one locally, but they make quite a few beers that are quite highly rated. So I would like to try Funky Buddha.
Another one for me, which it's in Vermont as well, called Sip of Sunshine from Lawson's Finest Liquids or something, I think they're called. Just another one you see all the time, highly rated. I'm sure some of these will be, well, I wouldn't say disappointing. I just think they'd be cool to drink. I like checking them off my checklist.
Right. Yeah, you gotta get them in the notebook. Yeah. It is fun to try all this stuff. So do you have any other outstanding whales?
Well, so Treehouse is in Boston. Trillium is the other Boston brewery that's one of those where I like anything. Specifically Fort Point, which is their American Pale Ale, which is just I like that style. And so Fort Point from Trillium, I think, is pretty much always on the top, other than Zombie Dust from Three Floyds, always at the top of the list for American Pale Ales. So that's nice. That's a must drink for me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to get to some of these.
Can I add one more?
Yeah, go for it.
So this is my strange one, but as everyone knows by now, I'm a huge fan of the Goza style.
Yes, you are.
These originally came out of Leipzig, Germany. That's where they were brewed originally.
Okay.
There are still brew pubs in Leipzig, Germany, serving traditional Gozas. One day, I will get to Leipzig, Germany, and drink a Goza there.
That sounds dope. That will probably be the truest expression, even better than Rubens.
And then I won't die so much as I will just fade off into oblivion. as my life completes.
Your physical husk will remain performing its daily duties, but
Sure,
your soul will have transcended
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
next
yeah.
plane. That's amazing. Well, hopefully, maybe in a year from now, we can do an update on the white whale list, and hopefully we've checked off a few of
Yeah,
these.
we'll catch a few more, maybe add a few.
Yeah, that's the other thing is I'm hoping to add some beers to the white whale list. We talked last time about the hopeful resurgence of Ballast Point. Maybe they're going to release something amazing now that they're independently owned, and that will add to the white whale list.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. Well, do you have anything else you want to add to this week's episode?
No, that's it, man. That was a fun one. I almost couldn't stop writing as I made my notes. There were so many things I wanted to talk about, but that was fun.
Definitely a good topic. So we will leave you there. This is the third episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast, featuring me, Jason, and one of my best friends, Steven.
That's me.
And we are signing off. We will see you in 1 week for episode 4.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, and tune in again next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram or Facebook for more fun content. Catch you next week. Cheers!